Hello friends, welcome to YouTube. Stackbeast here. So from this video, we are going to start our JavaScript series. So this is a part 1 where we will discuss about the JavaScript variables, objects and basic data types in JavaScript. Okay, so let's get started. So talking about the development environment, I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can use any other text editor or any other IDE, whatever you want. I'll prefer Visual Studio Code because this is lightweight, open source and has a large support of extensions. So I will be using Visual Studio Code. We could have also written the code in a Node.js, but I'll write the code in a HTML page. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. So you can easily grab the Visual Studio Code from the internet. Okay, talking about this Visual Studio Code, I'll use some extensions. Okay, to follow up with me, you can also use these extensions. So you can just go to your extensions panel and search for extensions. The one extension I will be using is the live server. So this is a extension live server by Ritwik Day. You can download this. You can install this server. This is a lightweight server. This helps us to reload the page. So as soon as we hit the Ctrl S and any changes in the files are detected, automatically the hot reload is made by this plugin. So we don't need to refresh the page after making a change. So the another plugin I will be using is a Prettier. This is a document formatting plugin. This is here by Espen Peterson. You can just install this plugin. This is really cool and keeps your document neat and clean. So you will see a good formatting. So first of all, we will have to create a folder for our project. So we can just go to File, Open Folder, and create a new folder here. I'll call it JS. Let's open this and select the folder. So basically your Visual Studio Code will open up in that folder. So this is your folder. So here we just need to create a file. So I'll create a HTML file from here. You can also create a file using Ctrl N or going to File and then New. But I prefer to create the file using this icon here. You can see there's an icon. You hover it, you can just create a new file from here. I will call it index.html. So this is your file. So this Visual Studio Code comes with a lots of inbuilt snippets. So the default snippet for the HTML is available. So you can just hit Shift 1, that is your exclamation sign, and hit enter. So this will just bring up the template of your HTML page. So I hope you are aware with this HTML already. If you are not aware about this HTML, this is nothing but like just a basic structure of your web page. So in order to write the JavaScript in your web page, we need to use a script tag. So you can write a script tag here. So here we will write our JavaScript code. There are plenty of other options to write the JavaScript code, but for the ease of understanding, I am writing this JavaScript code. You don't need to worry nothing about the other parts of this HTML page. The main part is here. Okay, so let us talk about the variables and objects in JavaScript. So as we know that variables are basically a kind of placeholders for any data in memory during the runtime. So as soon as your program ends, all the data in your memory is lost. So let's see how to define the variables in a JavaScript. Okay, so we can define the JavaScript variables using 3 different keywords. The number one is where, the another is let, and the third is const. And then you need to specify the identifier, which will actually identify that variable in program. So you can call something like where name equals and then some value like Vikrant. Let name equals Vikrant. Const name equals Vikrant. So these are the 3 different ways to define any variable in a JavaScript. There's one more way, that is you can also omit these keywords. So you can also simply type name equals Vikrant. Okay, so far we are missing a very common error, that is you need to type the terminator at the end. So you need to use semicolon after the each statement in JavaScript. So this is like the end of a statement. So these are the 4 ways. Let us talk about what is the difference between where, let, const. So where? So the variables defined using a where keywords are basically a global variable. So that is, the variables which you define using a where keyword are basically a global variables. So wherever you define, if you are aware about the function scope, which we will discuss in the future videos, so you will know that each function has basically its some local variables. But if you define any variable using a where keyword, then it becomes global. So it is like that if you define a variable inside the function, it will be also accessible outside the function. So this disadvantage of where keyword is removed by the let keyword, which is the improved version of where. So this removes the problem of global variable which we faced in the where keyword, that is the variable which we want to keep the private cannot be kept private with this where keyword. So we can use let in almost all the scenarios. So the third is the const. So this is used to define the constant variables. So this is used to define the constant variables. Okay, so the const is different from where and let in a manner that the value initialize, that is, if you initialize a value of const with some value, you cannot change this value directly. You cannot reinitialize this value, as like if you have defined the name equals to Vikram, you cannot make a change in your program saying that name equals stack based. Okay, the fourth type is specifying a variable without any keyword. So this is nothing new, but it is equivalent to this where declaration. So if you omit the any keyword in the front of identifiers, so this became equivalent to this statement. Okay, so you have seen me using these backslashes after the each statement. So this is how you basically defines a comments in a JavaScript. So we know that comments are a part of program that are used for documentation, and these are non-executable parts. So whatever we write inside after the double slashes, this will not be executed by the program. So this is ignored. This is a one way to define the single line comment. If you want to define the multiple line comment, you can use backslash, asterisk and hit enter, and then asterisk backslash. So this is way to define the multi-line comments, and whatever you write here, this is non-executable. So as we discussed in the previous video, the variables in a JavaScript are dynamic in nature. So it is like that if you define this name as a string, you can see I have defined this name as string in double quotes. Anywhere in your program, you can change its type to number. You can say it like name equals 1. So now the type of your variable will become a number. In order to prove that, we will now execute this code on the browser and see the output. Okay, so in order to execute the code, we'll have to right click. We are using a live server extension, so we can just open it in the browser using right click or open with live server. If you don't have the live server extension enabled, you can just open this file directly in the browser by going from File Explorer. So let's open it. So you can see my browser is launched, but there is nothing on this page. So I'll just split my windows. Okay, so I have splitted my windows so that we can just see the input code and output of the program together. So I will hide this sidebar of this Visual Studio Code using Ctrl+B shortcut. Okay, so the output of our code is here, but we can't see anything because we haven't done anything. What we have done so far is like we have just initialized some variable, but we have not actually printed them out. So I'll remove this all part and we will just define a variable using a let keyword. Let name equals Vikram. Okay, so the variable is declared, and now in order to print it on the document, we can use the built-in function of the JavaScript available for the HTML pages, that is document.write. So in document.write, whatever the text you pass, that will be printed. So I will pass a name variable. So basically this name will be printed on the document. If I hit Ctrl S, the document will be hard reloaded because we are using a live server extension, and you can see the output. The Vikrant is in output. Okay, so this is a one way to print this variable. But the another way which we will follow along this series is to use the console. So console is basically a developer tool where the developer write certain data which they don't want to show to the user and use for a development process, so that they can fix the bugs and see actually what is happening in the program. So let's open the console tools. We can just right click on the page and go to inspect. This open the developer tools. If you are on a Chrome, you will see this kind of interface. So we just need to head toward the console. So this console is basically where you can write any valid JavaScript code, and whatever you want to debug, you can pass the value from your code to this console, and this console is usually hidden to the user so they will not see. So in order to write to the console, we need to replace this line with the console.log and some value. So I will pass the variable name here. So let's refresh and let's see. Now the Vikrant is available in the console. Okay, so we were about to discuss the data type of this name variable. How can we know what data type this is having? So we can use the operator of the JavaScript called type of operator. So instead of a name here, we can use the operator called type of, and after the type of, we can specify the identifier name. Then it will tell what type of variable is this. So if I save the document, you can see it is a string. So after it is defined as a string, if I change it to name equals 1, you will see the type of has output as a number. So this has now become a number. So this is how the dynamic typecasting in JavaScript work in runtime. So let us just see all the data types available in JavaScript. So the data types in JavaScript are basically divided in two categories. One is primitive types and another is non-primitive types. So all the primitive types are basically a value type, and all the non-primitive types are basically a reference type. So reference and value types are basically our concepts where if we define a variable and passes its value to another, in the value-based variables, the value of the original variable is copied or duplicated to the another variable, whereas in reference type, the actual reference of original variable is passed to another. So the changes in the past variable affects the original variable, and in the value-based, this is not the case. So the value being passed from the original variables to the new declared variables are actually duplicated, so the new variables are created. So after taking a look at this chart, we will just take a practical example of that. So let us just see the available data types in JavaScript. So in primitive, we have numbers. So in numbers, basically you can store a data like any numeric integer with any fractional part, that is float or integer value. You can store all of them in numbers. So in strings, you can store any kind of data that is containing characters or mix or any alphanumeric character. Booleans are basically a data type which is containing either a true or a false. These are used for expressions. For example, 6 is greater than 7. This expression is false. So this kind of a data is stored in a type of Boolean. And there are two more data types available in JavaScript in primitive types, that are null and undefined. So undefined is a kind of variable which has been declared but not defined. So this is actually a data type where if any variable has been created in the memory but its value is not assigned, so it's like undefined. The another data type is null. So null is nothing but it is representing any variable which has been initialized with the non-known values. We can use this null variable at some times where we want to pass a some value to a function and we don't have any value. So we will see the practical examples of using null and undefined. So another non-primitive data types available in JavaScript are objects and arrays. The most powerful data types available in the JavaScript is objects. Basic object is a kind of object which is containing the key value pair. For example, here this age is a key and the value of this age is 12, and you can access its value saying a.age. So a.age will give us 12, and similarly a.name will give us wiki. So we can also change the object values by using a.name equals and assigning some new value. So the functions in a JavaScript are also treated as objects. So this is a bit confusing concept, but we will be clearing this in the future videos. But the JavaScript functions are basically a kind of objects, but these are also like a normal functions which we study in other languages. So we can just define a function using function keyword, defining parentheses and creating the body of the function, and write whatever we want to write in the body of the function. So there are many different ways to create the function. One of them is also to use the arrow function, where we don't need to use the function keyword in the front of the function, and we can just directly use the parentheses with this notation to declare a function. So arrays are basically a collections of an object. So collections of an object. So object can be any primitive type and non-primitive type. That is, objects can be normal numbers or object can be any complex object. Okay, so let's just get back to our code and see all these primitive and non-primitive types using the type of operator. So we are here. So so far you see we have defined the Vikrant, and when we check the type of name, it is giving number, because initially we defined it as a string, but later we changed it the name to 1. And then we just use the type of operator where you can pass the identifier and it will tell you like what kind of data type it has. So I'll just move it from here. So we have seen the data type for string and number. Now we will see the data type for boolean value. So if you type true, this is treated as a boolean. So you can see this value is treated as a boolean. The same for the false. And if you remove all the values from this declaration and check the type of, this is undefined. So this proves the concept that undefined is basically a data type in JavaScript. Okay, so now we can check the data type of our objects. So in order to create the object, we can use equal and use the curly braces. So curly braces basically defines the body of the object, and then you can use any key value pair. For example, I will use a age here, and then colon specifying the equivalent value, and then you can give it value like 15, and then comma. Note that here we will not use the semicolon, we need to use the comma under the object, and after age we have name and assigning its value to stack beast. So this is like how we define the JavaScript object. If we save it, you can see its type of the name is object now. And we can define a function using this notation, function, and creating body and do something here. But for now, we'll do nothing, but we just want to check the type of this name. So as you can see, the type of this name is now a function. So these were the basic data types available in a JavaScript. So in the next video, we will take a look at the control structure in a JavaScript using things like conditional statements like if, switch, and using the iteration loops like for and while. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe the button and hit the bell icon and share the video as much as you can.